Welcome to Life Stories, where the people you fear most might be the ones who save your life. Imagine being 7 years old, lost in a sea of strangers, and the only advice your mom ever gave you was to find someone society tells you to avoid. No cops, no security guards, just leather jackets, roaring engines, and patched vests. It sounds insane until it isn't. This is a story about what happens when trust defies appearances, when the past comes crashing into the present, and when the people you least expect become your fiercest protectors. A mother with a secret, a child with unwavering faith, and a town about to unlearn everything it thought it knew. Stay with us, because by the end of this story, your idea of family, fear, and second chances might never be the same again. And it all starts on the night a little girl disappeared at a carnival. The scent of funnel cakes and engine grease clashed in the air over Seabrook's oceanfront carnival, where laughter rose with the creak of the Ferris wheel and neon lights shimmered across faces half glimpsed in the crowd. But for 7-year-old Ellie Carter, time had stopped. She stood frozen between booths of spinning cotton candy and screeching teenagers, her small hands clutching a half-melted cone, her wide eyes darting, frantic. 1 second ago, her mom had been beside her. Now, nothing. Just noise, strangers, and the echo of a voice she couldn't find. Ellie didn't cry. Not yet. She wasn't the kind of girl who crumpled, at least not on the outside. But inside, her chest felt like it was shrinking. Her throat tightened as she called out, "Mom! Mom!" But the tilt-a-whirl screamed back instead. She tried weaving through the crowd, but the faces were too big, too fast. Security? She'd seen a guy in a yellow vest earlier, but he'd vanished like smoke. She took a breath, then another. Her mom's voice came back, like a recording played through static. "If you ever get lost and can't find a cop, look for someone wearing motorcycle patches." It was an odd rule. Her teachers had frowned when she said it during safety week. But her mother had never explained, at least not fully, why she trusted bikers. Just that one night, long before Ellie was born, a group of leather-clad strangers had saved her life. And now, Ellie had to believe that whatever her mom had seen back then still existed. Half an hour earlier, they'd passed a group of bikers loitering outside a weather-worn dive bar at the end of the boardwalk, the Iron Horse. Other parents had pulled their kids close, but Ellie's mom, Rachel, had actually nodded to them, almost respectfully. Ellie had asked why, and her mom had just said, "Some people deserve second chances more than anyone." Now, trembling but determined, Ellie began making her way toward the Iron Horse. It took longer than expected. She had to push through clusters of teenagers and dodge elbows. People barely noticed her. A clown bumped past, not even looking down. When she finally reached the bar's edge, the carnival noise faded under the low thrum of motors and a gravelly voice singing classic rock. The bikers were still there. Men and women in leather, covered in patches and tattoos, laughing, drinking, tough as nails. Ellie stopped a few feet away. Her heart pounded so hard she thought they'd hear it. One man stood out. He was massive, with a gray beard braided at the end, his vest bearing a phoenix stitched over a crossed wrench. He looked like he could snap steel, but his eyes had deep smile lines, and when he laughed, it didn't sound cruel. Still, approaching him felt like walking off a cliff. She stepped forward and tugged his vest. He didn't feel it at first. "Excuse me," she said louder, her voice shaking. He turned, startled. For a split second, his face went hard. Then he saw her. His entire demeanor softened like a truck shifting gears. He crouched instantly, massive and grounded, bringing himself to eye level with the small, frightened girl. "Hey there, little lady," he said, voice rough but warm. "You okay?" "I lost my mom," Ellie said, her voice cracking. "She said if I ever got lost, I should find someone with motorcycle patches." For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Respect. He nodded slowly. "Your mom sounds smart. I'm Grizzly. What's your name?" "Ellie Carter. My mom's name is Rachel. She's wearing a jean jacket." Grizzly stood up and let out a whistle so sharp it cut through music, chatter, and the pulse of the night. The bikers snapped to attention like soldiers. Without hesitation, they formed into motion. A woman with streaked silver hair, Clara, knelt beside Ellie and wrapped an arm around her. "I'll stay with you, sweetheart. Let the crew handle the rest." Within minutes, 20 bikers disappeared into the crowd like leather-clad shadows. Orders flew, names were called, sectors assigned, phones chirped. Clara glanced down at Ellie, impressed. You really remembered that rule? About finding us? Ellie nodded, her voice small. She said, you helped her once, a long time ago. Clara exchanged a look with a younger rider. Did she say where? No. Just that it was before I was born. As they waited, another biker handed Ellie a fresh cone. Two others took position near the boardwalk's edge, scanning for threats like bodyguards. Around them, the world blurred. But this circle felt safe, unshakable. Meanwhile, across the carnival, Rachel was sprinting between rides, yelling until her throat burned. She trusted her daughter to remember. But what if she hadn't? What if Ellie was wandering into the dark corners of the pier, or worse? When a police officer finally responded to her cries for help, his tone was casual, bureaucratic. Probably just wandered off. Happens all the time. He barely looked at her as he radioed in the description. And that's when Rachel saw the patch. A phoenix over a wrench. Charging through the crowd came a familiar silhouette. A biker. Grizzly. For a split second, the past slammed into the present. That night, that rain, that road. She hadn't seen him in 11 years, but there was no doubt. You Rachel Carter? He asked. Yes. Her voice was hoarse. Your daughter found us, he said. She's safe. Smart kid. Brave, too. Rachel didn't wait. She followed him back to the Iron Horse, heart hammering. When she saw Ellie sitting calmly beside Clara, licking her new ice cream cones, surrounded by people most of Seabrook crossed the street to avoid, her knees nearly buckled. Mom! Ellie shouted, running into her arms. You remembered, Rachel whispered, burying her face in her daughter's curls. They helped, just like you said. Rachel turned to Clara, tears brimming. You were there, Highway 47. I was pregnant. My car was dead. You squeezed my hand and said, you don't have to go back. Clara smiled. And you didn't. The bikers were returning now, the search called off. They stood loosely around mother and child, creating that same unspoken circle of safety. Rachel looked at each of them, weathered, tattooed, unshaven, and saw only protectors. Just then, the police officer who'd brushed her off arrived. Ma'am, is everything all right? Rachel looked him in the eye. Perfect now. These people found my daughter in 20 minutes. You were still filling out a form. He bristled, but said nothing as he turned and walked away. And as Grizzly offered to escort them to their car, something shifted. The crowd parted not in fear, but in quiet awe. What would you do if your child's only lifeline was a group of people the world told you to fear? Could you trust the unlikely and let go of what you were raised to believe? Because that night, under the lights of a seaside carnival, a girl didn't just find her mom. She uncovered the secret legacy of a promise made in leather and thunder. And Seabrook would never be the same again. It was supposed to end there, with hugs, tears, and a quiet ride home. But some stories don't tie themselves up so neatly. That night, Rachel barely slept. She sat on the edge of Ellie's bed long after her daughter had drifted off, listening to her breath, her heartbeat, the small sighs she made when she turned in her sleep. The events at the carnival played over in Rachel's mind like an old film reel. The flashing lights, the towering biker, the feeling of her daughter's arms around her. But beneath the relief, something darker stirred. She couldn't shake the sight of that patch, a phoenix rising from a wrench. Grizzly's vest. The same one she'd glimpsed through rain-streaked glass over a decade ago when she was bruised, terrified, and 3 months pregnant. But that wasn't what haunted her. What haunted her was the memory she'd buried deep, that she hadn't planned to survive that night. She hadn't just been running from Ellie's father. She'd been ready to disappear entirely. It had been Clara's voice, low, steady, unwavering, that pulled her back. You don't have to go back. Words simple enough to be overlooked. But in Rachel's mind, they'd been the first breath of air after nearly drowning. Now, the same voice was echoing in her daughter's ears. The next morning, Seabrook buzzed with whispers. At the diner, at the gas station, in the school parking lot, everyone had heard about the bikers who found the lost girl faster than the cops. Walter Fleming, who once scowled at every motorcycle that passed his window, now nodded at the group parked outside his restaurant. And when Rachel and Ellie walked in, flanked by Grizzly, Clara, and two others, the silence was softer this time. Watchful, curious, not hostile, but not everyone approved. At the counter, Officer Simmons stirred his coffee slowly, his eyes fixed on the group. When Clara passed by him, he muttered, "Still playing the hero, huh?" Clara paused just long enough to say, "Still playing the skeptic?" before moving on. Rachel caught the exchange. Something flared in her, a quiet fury. She turned to Clara once they reached their booth. "What's his deal?" Clara leaned back, her tone casual but laced with a weariness that spoke of old wounds. "He's the kind of man who thinks redemption has an expiration date." As breakfast wore on, bikers filtered in and out. Ellie beamed as she showed off her new denim vest, protected by the Road family, to anyone who would listen. Rachel watched her daughter laugh with Grizzly and couldn't help but smile. But just as she reached for her coffee, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A cold prickle touched the back of her neck. She didn't answer it. But then came a text. "You think that kid's safe now? They won't always be there to protect her." Rachel froze, her hands clenched around the phone. Only one person would send something like that. Only one person who used threats like riddles. She hadn't heard from him in years. No contact, no custody claims. Just silence. She thought he'd vanished. She hoped, but now he knew. Grizzly noticed the shift in her posture. "You all right?" Rachel hesitated. The truth clung to her throat like tar. She looked at Ellie, then back at him. "Ellie's father, I think he found us." Grizzly's jaw tightened. Clara sat up straighter. Across the room, Walter stopped mid-pour with his coffee pot. The air shifted. Even Ellie noticed something had changed. "I've moved 3 times, Rachel whispered. "Changed jobs. Stayed low, but I never changed my last name. I never wanted Ellie to feel like she had something to hide." Clara's voice was calm, but heavy with meaning. "You did what you had to do to build a life. That's not weakness. That's strength." Grizzly leaned forward. "Do you want us to handle this?" Rachel blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," Clara said, "we can keep an eye out. We've got friends in places your ex won't expect. You're not alone in this anymore." Rachel stared at them, a storm of gratitude and fear and memory crashing in her chest. She had spent years running, shielding Ellie from a truth that now felt too dangerous to ignore. But another truth was blooming inside her, that running wasn't the same as protecting. And now, protecting might mean facing everything she had once fled. Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone and revealing the truth you've hidden for years? Because at that moment, Rachel realized something terrifying. Ellie didn't just inherit her eyes or her stubborn streak. She might have inherited a past darker than either of them were ready to face. 2 days later, the first motorcycle didn't just rumble down the quiet lane. It rolled in like thunder wrapped in leather and purpose. Then came another, and another. By the time the sun dipped behind the pines, Seabrook's small-town silence had been replaced by the rhythmic heartbeat of engines and loyalty. They weren't roaring in anger. They weren't there for a fight. They came because one of their own had whispered the truth, and the road had answered. Rachel watched from her porch as the riders arrived, her arms crossed tight against her chest. Ellie sat on the steps, her new vest buttoned to the top, the patch on the back bright and defiant in the late summer light. Grizzly had called it the watch. Clara had called it family. Rachel hadn't called it anything, not yet. She was still trying to understand how her past had become Ellie's present. The texts kept coming, anonymous numbers, threats that stayed vague enough to be legal. He was always good at that, just enough to make her feel powerless, never enough to make the law care. Simmons had shrugged when she brought the messages to him. "Block the number," he'd said. "Change your info. Move again if you have to." Move again. Like it was that simple. Like roots were optional. That night, Rachel sat in the kitchen, the lights low, the hum of the fridge the only sound. Clara walked in quietly, a mug of tea in one hand. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to. She took the seat across from Rachel and waited. "I should have told Ellie the truth," Rachel said finally. "About him. About what we ran from." Clara took a sip. Would it have helped her sleep at night? No, but maybe it would have helped her understand who she is. Clara tilted her head. Who she is the kid who walked straight into a crowd of bikers because she believed in what her mother taught her. That's not fear, that's courage. Rachel looked down, eyes stinging. But she's still a kid, and now he's watching. Again. Clara leaned in. Then let him watch. Let him see that this time you're not alone. You didn't run. You built something. That girl out there, she's not afraid because you made her strong. Rachel didn't speak. She didn't need. Something inside her shifted, something long buried beneath survival mode. For the first time in years, she felt still. By morning, word had spread. The messages stopped. Maybe he'd seen the bikes lining her street. Maybe he realized she wasn't the girl he'd once broken. Maybe it didn't matter. Because a new story had begun to take hold in Seabrook, a story about second chances, not second fears. The town that once whispered about patches now waved when riders passed. Walter painted a new sign for the diner, coffee for road angels, always hot. Ellie brought Grizzly in for show and tell at school. He cried when he saw the crayon drawing she'd made. A little girl in a denim vest standing between a monster's shadow and a wall of motorcycles. And then came career day. Rachel had hesitated. The principal had given her a polite smile and said, "Are you sure about this?" But Rachel had just nodded. "I think it's time." The kids had stared at first when the bikers walked into the gym. Big boots, louder laughs, vests full of stories. But then Ellie took the mic. "My mom always told me to find someone with motorcycle patches if I ever got lost. And I did. And they found me. These are my friends." It was simple. It was everything. The applause was louder than anyone expected. But the real moment came afterward. A man approached Rachel near the playground. Late 40s, flannel shirt, wedding ring, the kind of guy who looked like he owned a hardware store. He said his name was Jack. His voice shook. "I left my ex last year, took my boy and ran. Been hiding ever since. You think they'd help us too?" Rachel looked over at Grizzly, who was patiently explaining to a group of second graders what a road captain did. Then at Clara, who was helping a little girl patch a hole in her backpack with duct tape and a smile. "They don't turn people away," Rachel said. "Not when they see something worth standing up for." Jack nodded, then walked back to his son. Weeks passed. Seabrook didn't change overnight, but it did change. The Road family kept riding, kept showing up. When Mrs. Albright's house caught fire, they were there with blankets and food before the Red Cross even arrived. When the local library lost funding, a ride was organized. 40 bikes, $10,000, just like that. But one quiet Saturday, Ellie asked a question Rachel hadn't expected. Rachel was folding laundry. Her hands stopped. Ellie sat on the bed, legs crossed. "The man who scared you, the one who sent the messages, was he my real dad?" Rachel turned slowly. The weight of that question was like a stone in her chest, but she didn't flinch. "He's your biological father," she said carefully. "But being a dad, that's more than blood. It's who shows up, who protects you, who teaches you right from wrong." Ellie thought for a moment. "So then, is Grizzly my dad?" Rachel laughed softly, tears in her eyes. "He'd be honored to hear you say that." Later that day, Rachel found Grizzly outside, polishing the chrome on his bike. She sat beside him and told him what Ellie had said. He didn't respond right away, just nodded, his eyes shining beneath the gray. "I never had a daughter," he murmured, "but I think I might now." Rachel placed a hand on his, and just like that, the circle was complete. The girl who had once been born in fear had grown into someone protected by choice. The mother who once ran now stood still, unafraid. And the strangers who'd once fixed a broken-down car on a rainy highway now sat at her dinner table, laughing with her child. Because sometimes the family you run from is replaced by the family you choose. And sometimes the most unexpected angels wear road dust, inked skin, and patches sewn with promises they intend to keep. What part of this story moved you the most, and why? Share your thoughts below. Comment 100 if this story touched your heart. Tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to know. And don't forget to share this story with a friend. Thank you for watching Life Stories.